Hi, I'm Greg Roston, the Gordon Kane Senior Fellow at the Stanford Institute for Economic Policy Research, or SEPR, and the Director of the Public Policy Program at Stanford University. Today, I'm going to talk about how states can get the most bang for the buck for the money they'll be getting from the federal government to increase broadband availability and take-up. Availability means that there's some way to get the internet into your home. Most households already have broadband at home, but for a decent number of more rural areas, they do not have terrestrial internet service available. As for take-up, some people have broadband available and don't buy home broadband for myriad reasons. Among them is cost, although right now, that shouldn't be an issue for low-income households, as there is the federal Affordable Connectivity Program to make a price essentially free. That may change in the near future. States are getting a lot of money, but there are lots of ways to spend the money. So while it looks big, so are the potential ways to spend and misspend it. The federal rules say to create a competitive way to award the money. That's great, but then the National Telecommunications Information Agency, or NTIA, the agency directed to develop the rules and distribute the money, didn't provide a lot of clarification on what they meant by competition. So how should states create competition to provide service to areas without terrestrial service? There are two primary ways to create competition when there's a limited amount of money for making service available. The first way to create competition is to have providers compete to serve specific areas. States could define distinct areas where there is no or limited service using the data it has from the new federal maps. Then the states will take bids from companies to provide a well-defined minimum service to all unserved locations in the area. The company with the lowest bid to provide service would be the winner. The second way to create competition is to have bidders in different locations compete for the scarce subsidy dollars by, for example, comparing the cost per new connection across areas. Such cross-area competition can be especially effective when there's limited competition within an area and thus no direct downward pressure on the costs. One of the best ways to implement these competitive ideas is by using an auction in some way. There are several different ways that an auction can be run. The keys are to set clear rules in advance, establish mechanisms to encourage competition, and ensure that the subsidy recipients follow through on their commitments. There are a lot of details to set up an auction for unserved areas. Luckily, the FCC has gone through them and put together a framework for how to go about it that the states could use completely. One key aspect is to set a reserve price or starting price that should be the high end of the state's willingness to pay for coverage of that area. Then competition can drive the price down and allow states to use the money they saved in other ways. If the states don't set up a competitive mechanism like an auction, they'll just end up paying the high price, which is likely more than they need to spend, and takes money away from other good broadband uses. Another key auction design factor is to prevent collusion. While it's tempting for a state to be reactive and allow potential providers to divide up service areas, going that way can reduce competition within territories as potential competitors explicitly or implicitly remove overlaps in competition. That lack of competition will increase costs for the states. Another tool to reduce collusion is to reveal the awards for all areas in the state at the same time. Many studies have shown that some collusion depends on tit-for-tat strategies that are based on sequential awards. This has happened in highway construction projects a number of times. In these kinds of bidding rings, firms trade off who wins the next project, even though the bids are supposed to be anonymous. That way, they can submit high bids and still win projects because they know that their rivals are submitting even higher bids. If a firm cheats by submitting a competitive bid and winning when it shouldn't, then the next time when it's that firm's turn to win, the other firms can punish it by also bidding low. So this mutually assured destruction is a mechanism to keep the cartel in place. However, revealing all winners at the same time takes away the ability to punish cheating, so the tit-for-tat strategy doesn't work, and each bidder will be wary that the others will also bid low, so they will stay in line. In addition, states should try to make rules clear to minimize post-auction gamesmanship, to try to redo areas or exclude bidders. With clear rules up front, bidders will have the strongest incentives to bid truthfully and competitively. The FCC's RDOF auction had two problems that are general procurement problems and should be avoided or avoidable for the states. The first issue is that the maps were not good. The unserved locations were not accurate. A lot of the areas that the FCC deemed unserved and added to the auction actually had service. Many of those have been taken back by the FCC, but mistakes can affect the auction's integrity and efficiency and should be avoided. Just to be clear, the map errors were not an auction problem. The second issue is that after the auction, the FCC deemed parties that were awarded subsidies ineligible for the subsidies. The states need to make sure providers live up to their promises by building in the necessary conditions into the award. Potential providers should only be given the money when the service is complete. Because the potential providers will then have a government guarantee of the money, they should be able to go to the private capital market to raise money for construction and operation of their networks. In that way, the risk is not borne by the public, but instead put on the party that's in the best position to understand it and to manage it. So let me wrap up by saying again, competition is the key to using broadband funds most efficiently. States can and should use auctions with appropriate guardrails to award subsidy dollars, and they should not rule out different types of technology like terrestrial wireless and satellite, as those might have good technical characteristics and much lower cost and provide service more rapidly to consumers. Then, importantly, states should hold providers' feet to the fire to ensure performance. Thanks for listening.